invited today to speak a little bit about mercy, and I think it's a very important concept, especially with the coming of December 8th and the Immaculate Conception, which will begin the extraordinary Jubilee year of mercy. If we look back in our Catholic history, the last time we celebrated an extraordinary year was in the year 2000. And if you've been paying attention at the Holy See in the Vatican, they have undone the cement sealing the holy doors in St. Peter's Basilica. So before I can even say anything about before I can say anything about the extraordinary year, I think it's important to understand mercy. And I think the most important way to understand that is through Pope Francis's recent language of accompaniment. To accompany people on their journey to God. Now, accompaniment, me as a professional musician, when I think of an accompaniment, I look at a musical score. And in the right hand, you usually see the beautiful melodies. The left hand usually fills in the music to make that melody sound even more beautiful. The way we walk with each other. But if we were to understand accompaniment only as walking with people, we would fall short of what Pope Francis is trying to tell us. He's telling us to not only accompany people in a journey, but to actually accompany people toward a direction. And what is that direction? Forward and upward. Forward to Christian discipleship and upward to the King. In this extraordinary year of mercy, we are inviting people to come. To return to the church. Not to just become stagnant spectators of Christianity, but to allow love to transform our lives to become the very image of Christ. We have to invite people to step out of their present romance with sin toward a life-giving obedience to God. Now let's take a look at that word mercy. It derives from the Latin, which means reward or gratuity. And we best understand that in French, merci, which means thank you. When we look at the word mercy in the English context, it means to freely offer clemency to someone worthy of punishment, or to release someone from a debt he or she owes. But for us who come from the Catholic imagination, we best understand it in the Latin, misericordia, compassion, co-passion, to walk with passion those who suffer. Literally, to have a merciful heart. Where do we see that in the book of Exodus? We see that when God saves the people from Pharaoh, and he says, I will be your God, and you will be my people. And he reveals to Moses a name, so that Moses can share in the divine life with God. It's a hint to the incarnation. And as Christmas comes close to us in the feast of the incarnation, we see again that merciful heart. God becomes this stuff, this flesh, this bone. And by being one like us in all things, he frees people from bondage. He touches the blind, the prostitute, and he raises the dead. That is the misericordia of the incarnation. But where do we see it crystallized and perfected? At the cross. Why? Because God stays there. He stays there at the cross. Knowing his angels can free him, he decides to stay there. And Robert Barron, the now Bishop of Los Angeles, he said, it is as if Christ became an atheist. So that at that very moment when he cries, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, he actually cries out to the atheist, loving those who would not or choose not or become indifferent of the cross. There you see crystallized in Christ the merciful heart of God. And if you're still not convinced, we turn to local. Bishop Michael Barber, the Jesuit from Oakland. He says, what is mercy? Mercy is where love attends to suffering. And we as Knights do that when we care for the poor, when we care for the vulnerable, as we did this past Thanksgiving, where love attends to the suffering. You're just not sympathetic. You are loving people in order to create an encounter where they meet Jesus Christ. This is accompanying people, accompanying them to Jesus, accompanying people in the RCIA, accompanying people in religious education, accompanying the Knights of Columbus, ultimately to Christ. And how do we see that? In the sacrament of reconciliation. Recoil, to return eyelash to eyelash. Cilia, reconciliation, to return eyelash to eyelash with Christ. So how do we see that most tangible here in Sacramento? On December 13th, the main entrances of the cathedral will be open and will be designated as the Jubilee Doors. And if you're into parody movies, you can watch that parody on the Catholic imagination called Dogma, where these two souls have been lost in purgatory and they need to get to the holy doors in order to be saved. Now, we would fall short if we as Catholics thought that by going to J and 11th Street and crossing through the main entrance, we believe in this magic that we're going to have instant access to heaven. That's not the point. The point is that on December 13th, people are invited to cross through the threshold of these holy doors, because the holy doors are a metaphor for Christ. Because everyone has to go somewhere. How do you get to heaven? You have to go through Christ. It's a metaphor for change and transformation. It's a metaphor for the pilgrim who feels that he is stepping into something new, a desire for conversion, an activity to follow Jesus Christ. So be merciful. Accompany people in their suffering and in their joy. And in this season of Advent, point them to the infant child who becomes a baby. To accompany. Maybe perhaps that is the great message of the Misericordia, the merciful heart, which we as men of Christ are called to have. So that when at the end of our lives we can look to that cross and realize we see our very selves. A blessed, holy Advent and Christmas to you all. Thank you.
Wow.